active breeding, and we stopped with mismating. And I'm gonna leave that there for a little while. I don't really want to talk about mismating until we really talk about pregnancy and pregnancy diagnosis and things that go with that. Then we'll kind of slip back in there and real quickly talk about termination of pregnancy. So, yes, this is Dr. Wertu's lecture on pregnancy and parturition. I actually have all of his lectures that he's given y'all. So I know what you've been told, what you are and are not retaining. Now, I cannot validate for, teaching skills. I'm not asking for your comments either when I say that. But you really do need to know these things, and I'll be honest with you, it doesn't get much more straightforward than the way you've got it. This is just the facts. This is what you need to know, and right now it's no longer just need to know for a test. You need to understand this stuff, and hopefully I'm getting that across to you. Don't let me forget this afternoon. I got a phone call last week from a class member from 2018, class 2018, and he was trying to AI some peppers, and he was asking for advice on protocols. So let's walk through that conversation this afternoon as part of our critical thinking exercise. That'll be really good and timely for us. So let's go fast. Okay, let's keep moving. This should be a review, but it is very critical to not just try to remember it or memorize it, but that you really understand here, because you're not going to be able to help maintain a pregnancy. You're not going to be able to properly understand termination of pregnancy if you don't understand how and why it's actually happening and why it's being maintained. All right? And understanding things like placental type, grossly categorizing it, and understanding histologically what that means. It all goes together. And I hope that you guys have been seeing that as we talk about things like the type of penis, the type of cervix, the short window of estrus, the very short coitus time, the very short return to ability to deliver semen again type times. You really need to be putting all that stuff together. So just like in this maintenance of pregnancy mechanisms, or even the type of placentas, all that stuff should make sense, and it should start to come around clinically about how we can manipulate all of those mechanisms through our understanding of physiology, anatomy, and histology, and then now, of course, implementing your understanding of animal behavior. I do understand and appreciate that a lot of you guys don't have farm animal and livestock experiences, and I will tell you, if I haven't said this already, it is a little bit of a challenge to understand, what the bull is trying to do, or what stallions are trying to do, and what we mean by, a mare, pitching a fit. All those things are kind of foreign, but you've seen some other animal act ridiculous and try to trim the toenails on a dachshund. You know what that looks like, right? Horse will do the same thing. She'll pitch a fit in the stocks and do an alligator roll, just like a basset hound will do, on the end of a leash. So they're not too far from one another. So let's get going. As we're moving through this lecture today, we're gonna go through all of it, okay? But we want to keep moving. Please ask questions. If there really is something, in these mechanisms that you don't understand, and you say, hey, I don't think I understand that the first time, I really, please elaborate. Let's do that. But again, this is just the facts. This is the bare minimum of what we need to understand, okay? So, and I'm doing this because I want to build and not recreate. I don't want to come in here and give a completely different lecture when I really do believe that all of the correct information is here that you need to know and understand, okay? So, fertilization, everybody gets that, right? And we talked about this already, that it takes place in the oviduct. And why is that important? Because we know that we can manipulate the uterus for 3 or 4 days, right? Post-insemination. We know that after 4 to 6 hours, because of transportation, we can start lavaging that uterus because those sperm are going to be dying. And they're going to create an immune reaction and create inflammation in the uterus. Okay? You just want to memorize where fertilization takes place. That's not good enough. Knowing why and where it takes place allows us now to clinically, manipulate these females. All right, so sperm are deposited in the vagina, and we've talked about the differences here. We talked about why the male dog actually can force semen into the uterus because of the copulatory tie and all of that third fraction, that intense, very, very large prostatic secretions of that third fraction. We talked about the horse, why that belling of the gland's penis probably opens that soft and muscular cervix, right? Probably directly inseminating into the uterus. With the boar, we have that corkscrew gland's penis, and he is creating a cervical lock. So remember we talked about the Camlin. He's probably actually even directing his gland's penis into each individual horn, okay? And then once these cells start, spend a little bit of time in there, she starts recognizing them as foreign, and she can start reacting to them, all right? So as a prerequisite, we know that the sperm is going to have to undergo some final changes. There's two big things that sperm have to do: transportation, capacitation. And that's that 4 to 6 hour window that we've been talking about. All right? So final process of capacitation, part of that capacitation process is these removal of these glycoproteins and then this hypermotility. Okay? So sperm are deposited there, and they just kind of went through this very turbulent thing. It's almost like they got a little bit of jet lag from landing in the airport, and you kind of got to shake it off and get back to your hotel room, take a shower, and get something to eat. Now you're ready to go. All right, that's kind of how these sperm are, and they become hypermotile. All right, that's really important in understanding why and when that happens, because if we are going to manipulate these sperm in the laboratory, like sex-shorted semen and things like that, if we notice that the sperm become hypermotile in a process of manipulation, you now know that you have initiated capacitation. You can physically tell that these sperm are moving around a lot faster. Thus, this sperm you drastically now limited its lifespan. Does that make sense? Because once we undergo capacitation, we become hyperactive. Remember that we have minimal energy storage. Okay? I've got just enough. Remember, I've shed all those extra organelles to try to get as light as I possibly can. I've got all my mitochondria pushed down into the mid-piece or the middle portion of that tail, and I've got a defined amount of energy. Once I undergo capacitation, I really need to be close to where I was supposed to have been to finish the job. Okay? I can't still have 7 more phases of sex sorting, in a flow cytometry machine. All right, so that's really important that once we get to this excitation phase, we really need to be in that female reproductive female's uterus. We need to be heading towards an oviduct. Where the clock is really, really ticking on us. All right. So lastly, as they approach and come in contact with that oocyte, they're going to have that acrosome reaction. Remember we talked about how we got that acrosome. We had that Golgi body, and then acrosomal vacuole, and then we spreaded that thing out, and then kind of made a swimmer's cap on top of that sperm head, and now we've got all those little molecules in there that can help us penetrate that zone. Okay? So this is all about a race to the finish. Whoever's going to get there first is going to come in contact. We're going to release those acrosomal molecules. And what's the next thing? What's the next thing that happens after an acrosomal reaction? What's the big next step? What is the cascade of events that's going to occur next? What's the next step? So after that sperm has that acrosomal reaction, what's he going to do? So he's going to try to penetrate, right? But before that, it's all about offense, trying to get to the zone. But now we make it to the end zone, and now what do? We start playing defense, right? So how does he play defense? Causes that zone of block, right? Initiates the zone of block. So, I made it first, party's over, shutting it down, boys. And so no other interference there from others from out of zone, okay? All right, we got all that stuff. We're going to have all these enzymes to help us penetrate. Understanding, and we've talked about this a number of times, understanding that window of time for transportation and capacitation allows us to understand when that male needs to be depositing semen relative to her estrus window, relative to her actually time of ovulation from the onset of ovulation, and then you and I, as veterinarians, allows us to understand the most appropriate time for delivery of semen when we have an artificial mechanism in play, okay? And we've talked about all that. See a cow in heat this morning? When is she going to ovulate? When's she going to ovulate? Probably 24 hours, right? And so we're going to inseminate her this afternoon so that we can be roughly 6 hours ahead of ovulation, right? So we're going to, 5 o'clock this morning, I saw a heifer riding Nolan. I'm going to get home at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to inseminate her. She's probably going to ovulate by daylight tomorrow. Took 4 to 6 hours, so I probably had sperm somewhere around, midnight or so at the oviduct, and she ovulates about 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning. That's as good as it gets. Okay? And so remember, the more we manipulate that semen, frozen semen, or we have sex sorted semen, we've limited the lifespan of that sperm or taken away some of the lifespan, or used up some of the lifespan. We're going to start inseminating closer and closer to the actual window of ovulation, right? Okay, so we understand all that. We didn't talk a lot about this, but the actual ovulated oocyte in most of our species is going to have already undergone this first meiotic division. Okay, so they're going to have this oocyte that is ready to be fertilized. Canids are the exception to that rule. Okay, she is going to ovulate a primary oocyte, and is going to need to undergo one more division. What did we talk about for her estrus window? How long is it?
90 days.
Long. It could be 9, 10, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes 2 weeks, right? For some of these bitches, and thus we said, how long is she going to be receptive? Quite a number of days. What kind of breeder is she? How many offspring is she going to have? She's monoovulatory, polypocious. So I got one crack at this a year. I need to have a nice long window of fertility, and I'm even going to put out an oocyte once I ovulate. It's not even completely mature, so it's got to take another 48 hours or so to undergo a meiotic division, and thus I'm going to basically find every male I can in the next 2 weeks, accept some semen, and I'm going to get these oocytes fertilized. And so we said that semen is going to live usually for at least a week, like the work is saying here, up to 11 days. Right? So understanding how all that stuff goes together, right? So learn what's normal, cow and bull, understand the differences. Here's the difference for the bitch. And this is also true in wild canids as well. That they do this mechanism as well. All right, you guys have seen all this, so you need to know that. You need to understand all this stuff. That's not the 5th time I've shown you that. Won't get too bogged down in that. But again, here's the big take-home message. All this stuff right here is happening during those first 4 or 5 days. It's all happening, in the oviduct, and then eventually we'll be depositing this very, very, very early stage embryo into the uterus about day 4 or 5, depending on what species. Okay? All right, so we know that after these sperm die, we said that it is foreign DNA, then they're dying, so no organ likes to have foreign DNA or dead material in it, so it's got to get rid of it. So there is a natural inflammatory reaction that happens in the uterus. Post-mating endometritis. That happens in the mare. It's very common. The species that's going to get most upset about these sperm being in my uterus is the mare. And it is very common to have these mares actually react quite violently. The more exaggerated responses that we're seeing today is probably not just due to the sperm. It's probably due to some of the other ingredients that are in all of those extenders that we're using. So many veterinarians will make note of what type of extender they receive that semen in, and if the mare has a really, really bad post-breeding endometritis, they will in the future, steer away from or request, if the people want to breed to that stallion again, can he be collected and extended in a different extender? Sometimes, it's the antibiotic. Energy metabolite, the fructose or sucrose, whatever kind of energy ingredient they have in there. And so, we do know that a lot of these mares become sensitive to certain types of extenders, so we just try to avoid those, okay? Let's see, and the mare says unfertilized oocytes are selectively retained within the oviduct, while fertilized oocytes move to the uterus. So that's a gee whiz kind of thing. This is interesting about a polytocious species. The bitch here talks about that these embryonic ages are synchronized by some mechanism. So remember we talked about she, her, and the queen, and the sow. They're not just going to ovulate all those oocytes at one time. There's going to be this trickle mechanism, right? Which means fertilization is going to occur at a different time for all of those oocytes. But what we now know is that even though she ovulates those on a certain day, and there may be different days of fertilization, there's some embryonic pause. It's like the body has this, there's an actual word, I think it's diapause. It may not be it. Because there actually are some species, more of marsupial-like species or some bear species, embryonic diapause. I think that's what it's called. Somebody can look that up on their own. But they actually will get pregnant, and they can just, if the sow, a bear sow, or whatever the female is, if environmental conditions are not favorable, she's not as healthy as she needs to be, they can just make this embryo just stop dividing, and when she gains some weights, or after she comes out of hibernation, or environmental conditions change, that pregnant, fertilized oocyte, that early embryo just picks up and starts growing again 3 or 4 months later. Amazing, right? Pretty cool. So even in these polytocious species where we're ovulating, these females have the ability to kind of sync those ages up. All right. So when you talk about, and we mentioned this, we just talked about pregnancy, fertilization, and conception. Now we have to maintain that pregnancy. So remember, we've always said it takes 2 to tango. We have to have the ovary produce a fertilizable oocyte, but then we have to have the uterus maintain and house that pregnancy. And we've talked about a lot of these species and how they do that. Maternal recognition of pregnancy, MRP, is going to be some mechanism for each individual species that prevents that animal from moving out of diestrus, right? Prevents them from returning back to estrus. So it is going to extend the diestra window. It's going to maintain the functional luteal tissue. At some point, all these species are going to switch from, not all of them, most of them are going to switch for primary maintenance of pregnancy moving away from just CL dependency to some other support mechanism. And it does get kind of elaborate. We won't get bogged down in all the dirty details of each species, but in general, you should kind of know what hormone, okay, or what physiologic structure, whether it be a CL or be the placenta, whatever, we kind of need to understand who's driving maintenance of pregnancy. Because if we need to terminate pregnancy or if we need to aid her maintenance of pregnancy, if you don't understand how she's doing that normally, you can't manipulate it, okay? So we talked about several of these. Interferon tau, okay? That's going to happen around what time? Day 14 days or so, because what's going to happen around day 15 or 16? Prostaglandin. So we're going to say, no, prostaglandin. Take it easy. Okay, take it easy. Pigs. Pigs are actually use estrogen. Okay? So lots of estrogens help prolong and maintain that CL of pregnancy. There's a little bit more that goes with that. Anybody know how else a pig, a sow, will initiate and maintain pregnancy? So her detection of estrogen produced by usually placenta or these offspring, these little pigs. But there's one other key mechanism to maintenance of pregnancy. The number of piglets. So she needs how many? Do you remember? 13. So don't confuse average size of litter with how many pregnancies detected to initiate and maintain. So she really needs four, 2 in each horn. She needs 2 in each horn. And that sounds like she's being really picky, but remember, she probably ovulated 20 to 30 times, so to end up with at least 2 in each horn is not that big of an ask to a sow, okay? So 2 in each horn, and then they will then thus eventually produce these estrogens that help maintain and protect that CL, okay? Horse, we talked about all that embryonic migration. There are other species that have that, but it's not as big of a deal because they're all polytocious species, and we're not really worried about one single conceptus moving around here or there, okay? Remember that in the dog, she's going to have a CL. It's going to be there for a defined period of time, whether she's pregnant or not. Okay? If I'm pregnant, I'm going to have this long of a diestrus. If I'm not pregnant, I'm going to have the same amount of length of diestrus. Okay? I'm going to have a CL that's producing the same amount of progesterone. Remember that she's not producing any endogenous PGF2 alpha. So if we need to manipulate her CL and we do give her something like that, she has a pretty exaggerated group of side effects that accompany that, right? Talked about the differences why the mare and the cow will react differently to that exogenous prostaglandins based on their systemic or their local circulation of their endogenous prostaglandins, all right? Cats, we don't really know. So for the horse, we don't really know. For the mare, we don't really know. We believe it has to do with all that moving around of that conceptus, and then there is some physical signal being transferred, getting some pathway that we're not aware of. For the queen, we don't know a lot about, and then with primates, it is that HCG, okay, which is that LH-like compound that female primates are producing. All right, so that just further explanation. We just talked about all that. You guys know this kind of stuff. That is a good little diagram. I think that comes from Singer as well. Here's the sow producing her estrogens. They're actually being picked up by the uterus. Okay, and so she actually has this little exocrine, endocrine switch mechanism where she actually is producing some of that prostaglandin, but it gets metabolized before it ends up in okay, as to where the cow, we're completely shutting down the release mechanism or the shutting down the cascade of events that would lead to prostaglandin release, okay? Here's some good diagrams of intrauterine migration. So we've said these mares have, they do have a defined body. They have kind of short horns, more like a Y shape. Okay? They don't really have the length to those horns. And it's a typically rather fixed position from mare to mare to mare inside the abdominal cavity. And we're going to have that little conceptus move all around, trying to touch. There's even some studies where they've ultrasounded these mares every 5 minutes over a 2-hour period. And they'll chart where that embryo is, and it has moved every 5 minutes. It's in an absolute different location over a 2-hour period. Don't worry about rhesus monkeys. So here's everybody likes to talk about, when actual implantation occurs. We haven't talked about that a lot, but the only other thing in this chart that we haven't spent much time on talking about is that time to day of attachment, okay, or implantation, when that developing placenta is really going to kind of take root, all right, and grab hold. And so obviously the time leading up to that is going to be the most critical time, okay, where the conceptus is growing. We're not maybe completely detected yet by the dam, so that's a very critical and sensitive window, all right. In the cow, so quickly, go into metastrus, right? And we're going to have that corpus hemorrhagicum start to develop into a CL. So we'll have progesterone rise, right? And if she's not pregnant, that normal diestrus window of 10, 12 days gets extended. So initially, it is all of the maintenance of pregnancy depends on that progesterone that's coming from that CL. Eventually, over time, we're going to turn some of that maintenance of pregnancy over, okay, to other mechanisms. So you can see there for the first 10 or 12, out there 15 weeks, really, cow is really dependent on that CL of pregnancy. It's doing a lot of work. You can look at the mare there and see how quickly, just a few weeks, okay, and she's going to turn over some of the maintenance of pregnancy. What is that drop off right there at about 4 or 5 weeks? Cups, endometrial cups. Remember we said that they're going to be developing somewhere around day 35 or so. So she gets a month and a half, 6 weeks into this, and she's turning over all the responsibility from that CL of pregnancy to those accessory CLs or those secondary CLs, okay? And you can follow that on out and make sense of that. Sow, early on, all those CLs from pregnancy. Then once I have those little piglets starting to form, they start making those estrogens, and reliance on progesterone drops off pretty quickly and plummets really for the remainder of the pregnancy. Okay. Relaxin, we know is an ingredient that oftentimes is really produced many times by the placenta, but it too may play an important role, and more so in some pregnancies than others. In the bitch, it is extremely important, and so actually one of our more reliable pregnancy tests is a relaxin-based test. So you do a SNAP test or an ELISA SNAP test looking for relaxin. Only a pregnant bitch can have relaxin, so that makes sense. If you don't understand where that relaxin is coming from, then you just know that I can do a relaxin test, and if it's positive, she's pregnant. Okay, but why? But why? I urge you to keep asking that question. But why? But why? So we know at a certain period of time that it is going to start being produced. So reliably at this window of time of pregnancy, we can pull some blood, we can run a relaxin test, and we can confirm that yes, in fact, she does actually have some functional placentas in there, thus she is pregnant today, right? So here's some other, species, placental progesterone. So again, moving away from CL, now talking about the placenta producing this this progesterones that are helping maintain the pregnancy. 2 or 3 weeks after implantation, that placenta picks up and starts making some progesterone. Remember, she's also, though, in human making HCG, all right, which is producing accessory luteal tissue, maintenance of pregnancy, supporting that CL. But you can see in sheep and horse, so for sheep, basically, second and third trimester, the placenta is going to be in charge of making progesterone. In the mare, you can see that about day 70, all the way out to day 340, there's going to be some progesterone. In the mare, however, she's a complicated beast. That's not the only maintenance of pregnancy mechanism for the mare. So the placental progesterones can't just be the only support mechanism. It can't do all of the work. We know that in the goat, for instance. Anybody know what the maintenance of pregnancy is in the goat? The goat is actually 100% CL dependent. So she relies 100% on those original ovulations, those CLs of pregnancy, for producing progesterone throughout the entire time. So because of that, so this is a species that has a really high rate of non-infectious abortion. Non-infectious abortions. So what are we getting at here? CL, some reason, gets mad and stops producing progesterone. I'm going to lose that pregnancy. So species that probably has the highest rate of non-infectious causes of abortion is the one species that has the most simplistic maintenance of mechanism in play there. So literally, these does can get extremely stressed out, and there can be abortions. Okay? We saw a lamb yesterday afternoon, and the guy was telling us about not too long ago, a year or so ago, that he was on vacation with his family, and 3 pit bulls attacked his sheep farm, and they killed 23 lambs. A couple of ewes. The dogs were actually taking the sheep into the pond and drowning them, and then going and getting more. And they were just having fun. They were just playing with them and sport killing them. Luckily, he has a really good neighbor who went home and got a high-powered rifle, and he laid them all to rest, and they will never kill another sheep again. But anyway, had those and they had been pregnant goats, and just those dogs chasing all those goats around, you would have probably seen a ridiculous amount of abortions in those goats just from the stress and all the cortisol released. And it is the cortisol, and we'll talk about that more. But so stress, you have a cortisol response, long-term cortisol responses can cause lots of things. You get ulcers, you get weight gain. You get irritable and grouchy, basically like most third-year vet students. Not y'all though, right? Nobody's gained any weight in vet school and become short-tempered and ill-natured or anything by about this time, huh? All right. So there's just a good little time frame, good little chart letting you know that which species, CL's doing what, and then placenta takes over. It says none there for the sow, and really that's because we talked about they're more reliant on estrogens being produced throughout her maintenance of pregnancy. In some of these species that are dependent on estrogens, you say, well, where does that estrogen come from? Well, where have we talked about most reliably are these estrogens coming from? How do we get estrogen in the system? How do we synthesize and make estrogen? So, ovary will make it, okay? Ultimately, the testicle will make estrogens too, but what's that pathway? So there's something that gets aromatized. Let's get testosterone getting aromatized. Where do we get testosterone from? So we took cholesterol, we made a progestogen that was converted to testosterone, which gets aromatized to estrogen. Okay? So both gonads are capable of producing estrogens because they both can take a cholesterol molecule and make a progestogen, which can be converted to testosterone, which can be aromatized to estrogens. So if they are requiring estrogen as part of my maintenance of pregnancy, like we see with the mare and we see with the sow, they're relying on those fetal gonads. So if you histologically know when the fetal gonads develop and are histologically normal and are producing their own sex steroids, you can kind of determine at what portion of her, stage of pregnancy that she'll become more reliant on estrogens, right? So makes sense. I don't really know. I'll just give you, for instance, in the bovid, the testicles develop somewhere around like day 41 or 42. Ovaries develop just literally 24 to 48 hours afterwards. So we would know if the bovine depended on that mechanism, it would have to be somewhere after day 42. That she would become reliant on estrogens that were being ultimately produced from the fetal gonads, okay? ECG, we've seen that, we know what that is, we understand that. They call it this cup, this alignment of those little embryonic cells there, or endometrial cup cells. They actually make almost like a little horseshoe pattern. You guys can appreciate that little horseshoe pattern there. So that's when she's going to be less reliant on primary progesterone or progestogen production from that CL pregnancy, and she's going to get some of the accessory CLs there. All right. This is what it is. Placenta is providing that progesterone or pregnenolone, which is the primary, early derivative in the progestogen pathways, but they allowing the fetus to, the adrenal cortex, steroid synthesis is going to make androgens, right? And we said that we can take androgens and convert them into estrogens, okay? So there's your pathway for the conversion, progestogen, androgen, estrogens, okay? There it is again. And I probably should have waited one slide, but it's not my presentation. I didn't know that slide was in there. I'm seeing it for the first time like many of you are. All right. So we talked about relaxing. You can see that everybody understands ECG, all that good stuff. Here's our bovine pregnancy. Okay, bovine pregnancy. Remember that 99% of the time she's going to get pregnant in the horn ipsilateral, which is what is ipsilateral? Same side, ipsilateral to the ovulatory ovary. So this one, ovulate, there's a CL on the right, there's a pregnancy in the right horn. Notice the elongation of that chorioallantoic membrane. So if it's in the right, it can easily reach the tip of that right horn, right? And then think about it, it really has to grow a long ways to get all the way out to the tip of that left horn. We know when that happens. That traversing into the contralateral horn happens somewhere around day 41, 42 or so of a bovine pregnancy. So if I'm palpating cows and I feel a membrane slip in both horns, I'm going to call her pregnant, and I'm going to know that it's greater than 42 days. Does that make sense? If I have membrane slip and I only feel it in one horn, prego, less than 42 days. Next, and then I can be a little bit more accurate, okay? Because if she's pregnant, she gets to stay. If she's not pregnant, what's going to happen to her? Send her to the corral, the golden corral. Okay? Yeah, y'all see that sirloin special? Hope you like Holstein. Probably got a TB outbreak in California again. Golden corral, bought them all up. Whittled out all those TB abscesses and served you up a sirloin, all you can eat. Steak has a big knock out of it. Has a big hole in the middle of it. Probably a nice abscess right there or something. See, that's why Taco Bell's smarter. They'll grind them up and slice them up and call them Jesus. I'll run in there real late at night. Get you Taco Bell to do that. You've been out just defiling yourself on a weekend. So, any questions on that? All right, but because we know when this blastocyst will extend that chorionic membrane into the contralateral horn, now we can help ourselves be better pregnancy diagnosticians.
A few weeks ago, you mentioned that you don't want to palpate them when you think you're pregnant because you might rupture the CL. So then if you're going in and palpating and feeling the membrane, like, don't you possibly risk?
Absolutely, absolutely, and we're going to talk about that today. Some people really are anti never touching the ovaries. Okay, so we shouldn't touch the ovaries unless we made a diagnosis of pregnant or not pregnant. If we know she is pregnant, what's the point? Okay, other than gee whiz and confirming to yourself. Okay, sometimes if I know this cow has been with the bull and she could be shortbred, sometimes I will appreciate a little bit of fluid or think I might have a subtle membrane slip in one horn, so I start thinking really early pregnancy. So I will cheat, find that ovary, and if there's a nice big honking CL, I'm going to tell them I think she is probably pregnant, but I don't have a hard and fast cardinal sign. I wouldn't hang my hat on it, but I also wouldn't give her any lutulized. You know, I'd probably wait on it. Next time we're out here, or if I had my ultrasound, I'd grab it probe, find a little tiny vesicle, you know. So you can absolutely traumatize a pregnancy. Absolutely, you can traumatize a pregnancy. So when you are doing pregnancy palpation, you know, you need to be very delicate approach, okay? There's even some people that believe there are certain congenital anomalies that are related to rough palpation, that the fetus got damaged while somebody was making that pregnancy diagnosis. One of the things that some of these suppositionists like to claim is atresia ani. You know what atresia ani is? So you have no functional anus. It's just a smooth little hairless flap of skin across that thing, and it's a pretty miserable death because they eat and they're born normal and they're super happy, and then about a week into life they haven't taken food, and then they just walk in a circle until they die. They're just terrible. But they believe that excessive or rough palpation will lead to that, and I call bull crap because I've worked at too many universities where I know these cows have been palpated really rough by a bunch of novice palpators on a very regular basis, and I've never seen an atresia ani at a single university that I've been a part of, nor anybody else that I know. So I think it's baloney. You know, maybe there's one guy out there that's or, fire them, you know, get another palpator. But that's a fair question, and yes, by all means, you can disrupt the pregnancy. All right, here's our piggy. We're going to be dropping down these embryos from the tip of each horn, from the oviduct, okay, and then they're going to scatter like flies. Okay, they'll swap sides and move around and go back and forth until everybody kind of finds their comfort zone. And then they'll day 16 gonna do my initial pregnancy palpation or ultrasound? Before that, absolutely, before that. So no later than day 14, okay? And typically, day 14 is a good window of time. You bred her on this day, bring her back in 2 weeks, and we'll scan. You're not gonna feel that vesicle, okay? You could if you wanted to, but because again, there's no predictability to where it's gonna be. You know, you're really chasing, and you're kind of on a witch hunt, as opposed to, again, that early pregnancy in a cow kind of gives me an indication of which horn I might be dealing with. So we typically, you also, but however, I should say, you can kind of get a potential indication. If it is day 14 after ovulation, what phase of her estrus cycle should she be in? It's day 14 after ovulation, and you've inseminated her, and you bring her back for a pregnancy check. Pregnant or not pregnant, where is she at in her estrus cycle? She's in diestrus, right? So based on what we know her hormonal prevalence or dominance should be, progesterone, we should have a predictable tone to that uterus, okay? You know, we don't do, we'll talk about this more later on today, but when we do pregnancy palpation in the bovine, most people are not doing it till well after 30 days. Well, if she's well after 30 days, what could have or possibly would have already occurred? Another estrus, right? If she didn't get pregnant, she would have had another estrus, okay? So one of our indications of being pregnant is non-returns to estrus, right? Didn't see her back in heat, so hopefully she's pregnant. If you're doing pregnancy checks at day 30, day 35, whether if she was not pregnant, 35 days after insemination, where would she be at in her cycle? She would be the second diestrus, right? So if you palpate her uterus, it should be relaxed, right? So does that really help you? No, she could just be back in diestrus again, right? So we feel, but we would like to feel it be relaxed. So if you go in there and it's all toned up, and you're doing preg checks at day 35, you're going to be worried that she is now asynchronized. She's gotten off, which means she might have got pregnant, lost it, and now she's cycling back. She's gotten out of her synchrony of every 21 days. Follow me on that? Not trying to confuse you, but that's the reality of that matter. All right. With our placental types, okay, and hopefully you've caught a little bit of drift of this. Who's going to have diffuse? The horse, the mare, okay? So what's unique about the mare? So she's going to get pregnant, and then as soon as she foals, what's her return to estrus interval? 10 or 12 days. 10 or 12 days, she's going to have a foal heat, okay? So the ovaries get crunked back up pretty quickly, all right? But what is the uterus doing? Do you think it's completely normal in 10 or 12 days? No, it's not. It's not completely normal. It's bigger than it should be. It hasn't completely involuted. So have we talked about involution very much? So there's 2 phases of uterine involution. All right? How are we going to grade involution? Involution? What is involution? Involution is the return from gravid size to pre-pregnancy or a non-gravid state. Okay? So trying to get back to normal. Now, once you've used that thing, it will never be normal again. You know, old gray hair ain't what it used to be. So you stretch that rascal out, it'll never be exactly the same. I can palpate cows, especially cows, you're palpating heifers, really they're young cows that have one calf. You can tell which horn they were pregnant in. You know, it's always a little bit bigger after that. So, two ways we need to grade or examine or categorize or look at uterine involution. Anybody know? Come on, you're fart smellers or smart bellers. Come on. Size. How big is it, right? How big is it relative to what it should be? Okay? So, each one of these species, and obviously we're doing a lot more rectal palpation on our large domestic species, the bear and the cow, so that's who we're really talking about here. But we're going to reach in there rectally and we're going to grab a hold of that uterus and grab a hold of individual horns, and we're going to say, relative to normal, how big is this thing? All right? So the real question is, how long does it take for that uterus? Let's talk about the mare. She's up first with her little diffuse implantation mechanism. How long does it take to return to normal anatomic size? Tony says 2 weeks. That's fair. When the full wean, so maybe 7 months later. 2 weeks and a half. See, it is probably closer to a month, okay? 3 to 4 weeks or so. Now, you told me though that she's going to come back in the heat in 10 or 12 days. So if she's still trying to shrink her uterus down, and I've already been pregnant for 2 weeks, how's that fly? It's not attached, right? Go back and look at the chart on when implantation occurs. It's going to be a while, right? It was never straight away. We love to think these things just come out and grab hold of the uterus and just, like a hookworm, and they just dig in. They don't. They have to grow that chorioosmotic membrane and traverse both horns and spread out a little bit. Once it's spread out, we'll get comfortable and we'll dig in, okay? But how are we digging in? What's her type of implantation? It's diffuse. So do you think that is a very deep contact? No. We got a very superficial contact spread out over the whole entire uterus. So do you think our other mechanism that we grade by, what anybody know the second way we're going to evaluate involution? No. So it does have to do with blood supply. We're going to look at it histologically. Okay, so what's it doing at the cellular level? All right, because what it was doing last week at the last stage of gestation, that's not necessary for recognition and maintenance of a new pregnancy, right? Remember we talked about that uterus has to make that histiotrope, okay, that fluid, that uterine milk. So we got to go from maintenance of pregnancy to feeding an embryo. All right, so we got to switch mechanisms. How fast can I take these areas of implantation and get them back to square one? If the mare has the ability to get pregnant 10 or 12 days after she spit the last foal out, what do you think her histologic turnover rate is? Pretty doggone good. Now, does that make sense with a diffuse placentation mechanism? It's a very superficial attachment, and so I can really turn that thing over and get back to square one. All right? Let's switch over to the cow. What type of placentation method are we dealing with? Cotyledonary. Okay, so we're going to have these zones. Imagine that mare. If we said, all right, we're going to take this 100% covered endometrium with diffuse attachment, and that's why the mare's endometrium or the chorioallantoic surface looks like velvet, okay? Because it's this nice little crushed velvet appearance with all these tiny thousands of attachments. If we said, hey mare, I need you to get all of your attachment kind of into about 100 to 120 groups. We can't just be all spread out over here. just like taking all 70 of y'all and putting you into 10 surgery groups. Right? Now we have zones of students, we have groups of students. That's all the cow or the ribbon has done. They've taken all those superficial attachments and said, all right, y'all get together somewhere. Get together somewhere. And the cow will produce about 100, maybe 120 cotyledons. So if I bunch and zone up all of those attachment sites, do you think that attachment's going to be superficial, or got to dig a little bit deeper? I got to dig a little bit deeper, okay? And that is very simply, don't make it harder than it is, that is the difference and how you, how you differentiate endothelial chorial attachments versus epithelial chorial attachments. The tighter we zone these things up, the less number of places of interface, the more deeply attached we are going to be. Because what are we trying to grab a hold of? What are we trying to find? Trying to find a blood supply. So if I only do it in a few places, I got to dig really, really deep and get a hold of a big one. Right? I need to get on a main line there. If I spread it all out, I can be really superficial and find a bunch of capillaries. You follow me on that? But if I'm a primate, I mean, these things really get down in there. Okay? I mean, they really grab a hold of that uterine wall. All right? And it is actually why women lose their ability to have functional pregnancies, and it starts at around 40 years of age. Every time she has a baby, that thing actually digs in so deep and so tight, it almost renders that portion of the uterus useless for another pregnancy. So the more offspring that she has, the more likely, and she's got to be aging at the same time, but the more likely you are to have congenital anomalies in an older woman. Okay? She is aging, but she has less functional surface of interface for implantation. Follow that logic there? Our daughter Gracie is 5 months this week. My wife got pregnant, didn't know it, lost the pregnancy, and then she got pregnant again with Gracie. They had a really hard time detecting a fetal heartbeat. When you just lost the pregnancy and they can't find the fetal heartbeat on the day you're showing up for fetal heartbeat check, Mama don't like that, and she's getting kind of irritated with the world and everybody in it. But she had a full frontal placental attachment, so that detection of sound waves was trying to go through her abdominal wall, through her uterine wall, through the placenta, which was 3 or 4 times as thick as all those other layers, and then there was tiny little heartbeat on the other side of it. They wheeled it around, shot her from the side, it was grown, right? So and every time she would go back, it'd be a different nurse, and they wouldn't know that, and they couldn't find the heartbeat, and she'd freak out every time. You know, very traumatic, very traumatic. But does all that make sense? You see how we're organizing, or we're the mayor, we're a little bit disorganized, okay? And it tells us how deep those attachments got to be, and how fast I can turn back over. Let's take a break right here, you guys. Do whatever you want to do, and we'll catch back up here. starting to understand where I'm going with this, let's jump back at the couch. We talked about the mare having this diffuse. And do you think she's going to be epitheliochorial or endothelial? Yeah, she's kind of superficial, right? She loves you one day and not the next. Very superficial with the mare. So she does all these loose connections. Now, if we push those into some cotyledons, where do you think we land histologically? You actually still epitheliochorial. Okay? We've just kind of crowded everybody up. Okay? We've divided that total 100% mass, still got 100 to 120 attachments. But they are, I mean, if you measure, histologic depth, they probably are technically deeper than the mare. But as far as tissue layers, where they're still considered endothelial. What if we, so the mare is diffuse, who else is diffuse? Pig, sow. Pig is diffuse. So all ruminants are cotyledonary. All ruminants are cotyledonary. Anybody know how many cotyledons? I told you in the bovine, there's about 120 or so. Anybody know for our local black-tailed deer? It's a ruminant. 63. 6. 3 in each horn. 6. Deer? 6. So they commonly twin, which means they can functionally produce an offspring with 3. Okay. Goats, small ruminants, they don't have as many either. You actually, they will actually cup towards the fetus. So if you're looking at scanning a doe and trying to determine if she has, number one, pregnant, yes, they already have placenta or cotyledons. It's sometimes hard to tell if it's a twin or you back on shining on the same one. Many times you can find a view where there's 2 cotyledons facing opposite of each other. So if you find 2 cotyledons facing opposite of each other, there has to be a fetus over here and a fetus over there. Okay? So still going to be endothelial. All right, now let's go and get it down to zonary. Who's zonary? Dogs and cats. Carnivores. Pretty much anybody in the carnivore family. Endothelial, epithelial. Endo, they're digging deeper there. All right, this boy is going to be who? Primates. Primates and rodents. Primates and rodents. What is that categorized as? Hemochorial. It's taking endothelial and kind of one-upping it. It's going to take it to the next level. And that's what we're talking about. They're so deeply rooted in there, they're literally like, maternal and fetal vessels are like touching each other. They're digging so close in there. So very, very, very concentrated, very thick, very dense, and does deep attachment from the fetus to the dam. And so if women do have, like my wife had, this very frontal attachment, it actually could be considered a high-risk pregnancy because you're most likely to bump into it and cause a hematoma or, some degree of bruising or trauma to the placenta. Wasn't the case, but for us, thank goodness. All right, so there's our layers there. You guys have seen this. You guys can, look back at that and study it. But each one of those layers, as we categorize them, we're making a deeper and deeper contact between, endothelial, really getting to real blood vessels. How close can we get those to one another? How much erosion are we getting through the maternal endometrial normal mucosal surface there? Okay. There's everything we just talked about all in one nice place. You guys love charts and stuff. I have to memorize those. I don't really understand them, but if you need to memorize that again, there it is. All right. So here's the little piglet, diffuse placentation, all those micros. So sometimes some literature will categorize diffuse as microcotyledonary. Okay. So it's all these tiny, tiny, tiny little individual cotyledons. I don't know what to say about that. Cow. Here's what I didn't finish asking. Let's jump back to involution. When do you think normal anatomic involution is for the cow? When does that uterus return back to a pre-gravid size? A, 2 months. Hang on, that's where you were close to something else. 4 weeks, 28 days, month, somewhere in there. Okay, it's going to take it a month. So, that being said, what do you think it should be in 2 weeks? Half. So if you're out on the farm and you're palpating, especially dairy cows, and they say, calf, 12 days ago, when you reach in there and you feel her uterus, you should expect to feel a uterus roughly twice the size of normal, or half return to normal. Whether your cup is half full or half empty. You can say 2x, non-gravid size, or 1/2 return to non-gravid size, however you want to describe it. All right, what about histologically? When is she going to be completely involuted? 6 weeks, 42 days or so, roughly. Yep, 6 weeks, month and a half. So, when do we normally expose cows to bulls after parturition? 2 months? Yeah, roughly 60 days. So her uterus should be anatomically and histologically normal by 42 days, month and a half, right? And really, we should also expect her to have had an ovulation since parturition. So those are our determinants of trying to decide if this cow is ready to breed back. Grossly, I palpate that uterus, it feels normal. No discharge. What do we call postpartum discharge? Lochia or lotia, however you want to say it. You want to say lochia today? What's your answer? Lochia. How long will the lochia exist in the cow? Anybody know? Up to about 3 weeks. You can have some discharge, right? So by the time I hit 3 weeks and I'm palpating this cow, should be really close back to being normal. I shouldn't detect very much discharge at all. By 1 month, feeling relatively normal. Again, that form that was just carrying that pregnancy is probably still slightly larger than the non-pregnant one, but no discharge, and I hope to feel some follicular activity, out on those ovaries that she's cranking back up in her cyclicity. So if I have a dairy cow line today, it goes bred, it says calved, and they're going to say fresh 43 days ago. Well, what do we want to feel? We want to feel a completely normal uterus, no discharge, and I hope there's a CL somewhere. I hope she's already ovulating. And if I have all those determinants on board, what am I going to tell this farmer to do with her? Breed her on the next heat cycle, but he's not going to stand around with 3,000 cows and do heat detection, is he? What's he going to really do? He's going to sink her. So enroll her. We're going to tell him enroll her. BWR, breed when ready, enroll her. Okay. Most people are going to still wait to 60 or 70 days. A lot of the reasons they're doing that is because that cow also at around 45 days is probably at peak milk production. And so that kind of starts to wane a little bit, or at least plateaus out, so she can kind of let her metabolism catch up with herself, okay? And that's more conversation for a dairy day. But, okay, understanding histologic and anatomic involution, understanding depth of connection, displacement of connection, really helps you understand what the normal mechanisms are and how I can help my clients manipulate those things. Okay? So if you don't know normal histologic involution, you don't understand why the mare can cycle back in 10 or 12 days. Well, it's because she has this very superficial, spread out connection that she can have endometrial turnover at a very high rate, And she really only needs to be ready, if she ovulates on day 10, what day does the uterus actually need to be cleaned up and ready by? Day 14 or 15, right? Because that embryo is not going to drop down in there until 4 or 5 days. So by 2 weeks, she has the ability to completely undergo histologic involution, even though she may still spend another 2 or 3 weeks trying to anatomically shrink back to normal size. All right, dogs and cats are zonering, don't get all that stuff, right? I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. That makes my face hurt. Parturition. We'll wait for parturition. Let's do this. Let's switch over. Let's switch over to this other PowerPoint. I sent you guys a couple of PDFs. Actually, let's cruise through this guy right here. This is actually a good little document. I know you probably don't care for it because it's a tight document, but it's really a good document. I got to stand here today. Drop the mouse. Chain to the. All right, so pregnancy diagnosis. Again, every one of these species that we're dealing with, we're going to have points of emphasis based on their normal physiology pathways of pregnancy to have peak abilities to detect pregnancy, and then at different parameters, knowing that we are producing different hormones, we can get into blood tests or milk tests, or can we take radiographs, what's the best time to ultrasound, all those things. All right, so Cyathinosis is the technical term there for diagnosing pregnancy, and he outlines here, Maxwell, he's a theriogenologist over at Auburn, one of old mentors. And I kind of mentioned this, one of the most common ways to recognize or discern that maybe this animal, this female, is pregnant is their failure to return to estrus. Okay? Now, just thinking about everything we know about females returning to estrus, what species is this going to be most helpful in? Or which species is this not going to be very helpful in? If I said, how confident would you be on assuring me that this female is really pregnant based on the fact that I have not seen her back in heat? Name the species that you would be pretty confident in saying that. Cow and horse. Maybe. What behavior? So we didn't see anybody standing to be mounted, right? And how often is she going to do that? Every 21 days, right? What about the dog? If I told you, well, she must be pregnant, see her back in the eating. Yeah. I'll let you know in 6 months. Yeah. We're not going to see her back in heat maybe for 9 months. Okay, so that's not a very reliable mechanism. So based on that estrous cycle or estrous cycle length, those species individually, this is going to be a better, okay, prognostic indicator. And you're right, those behaviors, the way they act, they're very expressive, but those moments of expression come every 3 weeks. And so we're going to have noticed that, all right, no other behavior associated with that. I really feel like she is probably in heat. Okay? Now, there are problems with that. That's why this is an assumption. This is not, there's not a high degree of specificity to this. Okay? Y'all like when they talk about sensitivity and specificity? I don't really understand that stuff. They actually asked me about that in my master's defense, and I just, well, I rambled. I just tried to like confuse them. Actually, when I did my grand rounds, let me call it that, but I did it on squamous cell carcinoma on the penis of a Appaloosa gelding. And actually, Dr. Barrow was my mentor. And we did a colectomy. We had taken that gelding's penis off. But anyway, the dermatologist in the school was there, and she said, statistically speaking, and wanted to know the stats on all this squamous cell crap. I didn't know what she was talking about, and and I gave her a little. Well, that's a fair question, and so to answer you completely, statistically and non-statistically speaking, I have no idea what you're talking about. You have any questions? And she was standing there, like standing up in the room with a little clipboard out, and I just totally ignored her. So anyway, fed to return to estrus. Obviously, our polyestrus species is going to be very, very predictable. It can be dangerous to make this assumption even in seasonal polyestrus species. So if we're thinking a mare, we know a mare got covered in June or July. You don't see her back in heat. She's probably pregnant. Or she could be what? In anestrus. Yeah, she could have moved on. Okay. Notice here in candelids. See, gave y'all the heads up there. They will expose the female, so we have to tease some of these species to try to see if they are receptive to the male. And the camelids, the female, if she's pregnant, she will spit off the male. Okay, and I mean really, you can hear her like hop one up and it flies too, and they got these flappy lips, and it's just like you need to do like one of those slow, time lapse photography and just see all the spit molecules going everywhere. All right, so notice this statement. While return to estrus is often an excellent indicator of non-pregnancy, failure of estrus detection, it is not always. Okay, we have to be able to rely on the persons doing the estrus detection, and we have to rely on these females having normal behavior, and they just often don't do it. Some of them are shy, and some of them are very outspoken. Okay, so somebody mentioned observation of external signs. Okay, when we see, they look pregnant, right? Some of these girls look pregnant. I've had a lot of them look pregnant, and they're really just obese because they love to feed her more because she's eating for two now, and then they just got this really fat horse, okay, or even a really fat dairy cow that's never lactated. And now she's so fat that it's actually going to impede the development of her mammary gland, so she's pretty much useless. Anywho, no one get off on that, okay? Anybody know what it means to talk about a cow? We say she's springing. They have a group of springing heifers, and that's S-P-R-I-N-G apostrophe N, springing. Anybody know what a springing heifer is? Chad, what's a springing heifer? She's about ready. So when you get out there and you walk behind her, and you're pushing her up to the pen, you look at her backside, and it's going to be bouncing with every step. Okay? And you're going to see her whole perineum doing this with every movement. Okay? It's going to spring all the way back to the barn. Why is that? Things are relaxing. So what is that being caused by? Relax in. Yeah. So relaxin, the hormone relaxin, will ramp up in those last stages of gestation. Now, there are a lot of estrogens produced, so we didn't talk about parturition, but I heard somebody say estrogens. You're right, there are a lot of estrogens on board, and uterine contraction and cervical softening, there has to be an estrogen priming, okay, an estrogen priming of the tissues for the oxytocin mechanism. Think back about what we said for ovulation. We had to have enough estrogen on board, right? Enough estrogen on board to cause a what? LH spike, okay? LH spike or peak, okay? That exposure of estrogen is also a wake-up sign or signal to the posterior pituitary to say, hey, you know, she's ovulating, get ready, oxytocin, because we may need you to run down there in 2 weeks and squeeze on that uterus a little bit and release some PGF2 alpha and get rid of this CL so we can run back through estrus again. So anytime there's an oxytocin release, there's usually some estrogen priming of the system. So estrogen's not really a wrong answer in there. It does happen in late-term pregnancies, but it's usually not the mechanism that's going to be causing the relaxation of all those tissues, okay? So palpation, we can do transabdominal palpation with all you cats and dogs and I don't want to say lesser species, but that's offensive to some of you cat and dog people, I'm sure. But good luck eating when it's just you and your dog left. Hope y'all do well. Anyway, so we're going to feel, but there are windows of time when we can predictably feel those vesicles. And that's what you're looking for, is to try to palpate those vesicles. There shouldn't be anything else in the abdomen that is a string of lobules or like a giant pearl necklace, okay? If anything you palpate in the abdomen feels like that, it is probably pathological. Pregnancies are pathological too, okay? So pregnancy palpation, somewhere around 4 weeks, about halfway through that gestation, you can really feel some nice old, probably, you know, golf ball size type vesicles and really discern those things. After that, they really start to soften and they elongate, and that uterus really starts to take on a lot more fluid, so it actually gets harder to individually appreciate those vesicles. So somewhere, you know, in that 3 to 4 window week is probably the best for dogs. And he's got stuff in here about queens. I mean, I don't know, man, you can just, they're not morbidly obese, you can feel them. They're so daggone flexible, even time they're not, you can still feel them. So our bigger species, obviously that's less predictable. We can't wrap our arms around those things. So what do we do sometimes in cattle and horses, or maybe some small ruminants? Anybody know what allotment is? Allotment. They're trying to create a fluid wave, right? And so you can go up to those girls low in their flank, and you're not rearing back and, you know, punching them. You're getting in contact, and you're trying to push anything that could be on the other side of the abdominal wall away from you, and then you're going to kind of hold your ground, hoping that whatever goes away is going to come back. Every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and trying to bump your fist. So you're not trying to punch that calf in the face. You're trying to push him away from you and see if he'll come back to you. You're actually going to do that too when you're rectally palpating, and sometimes I'll do that. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But that does help me on small ruminants. I get up, and even some big dogs, I'll stand over the top of them and actually pick up on their abdomen, okay, and kind of slosh their abdomen and see if I can feel something hard enough land in my hands. So that's helpful as well. Sometimes with some cows, you'll even see some people use their knee, okay? You kind of take your leg and put it up in her flank and push back and forth. That way if she kicks, you know, you're not got your head down in there and not paying attention when you kick in the ear, you just get kicked in the thigh. All right, so then transrectal palpation. This is what all the cow people want to do. They want to go palpate. Let's hurry up and palpate. So cows is gonna, and mares are gonna be the most common. You know, these days we're really using ultrasound a lot in the mare, and we're using ultrasound more and more in cows. When do you think you should be, if you call yourself a cow vet, when do you think palpation-wise, how many days into gestation should you be able to predictably palpate pregnancies? 30 to 35. You're doing it, and you're part of making your living, and you say that's what you are, and you claim to be good at it, you should. I think you got to go do a lot of dairy work to do that, because you have to, I think, you have to know exactly when they were bred, and then go feel it, convince yourself it's there, and now I know what a 28-day pregnancy feels like. I don't think you just walk out to beef pasture and palpate a cow that's, could have been exposed 28 days ago. That was at least my experience. I palpated a lot of beef cows in practice. In my residency, we did a lot more dairy work regularly, and there was always those beef cows that, they had, you get out there and you find out they only pulled the bull 30 days ago. And you're like, oh man, some of these things could be, 30 days and they're gonna be tough. And I would say, those are the ones I would say, I think I got a membrane slip in that one horn. That makes sense. That sheep touched that ovary. Okay, there's a big CL3. Think she's pregnant. Need to watch her closely over the next 2 weeks, make sure she doesn't come back and heal, or if I'm out here again, I can recheck her, and keep a handful of them up. It might be short rest.
What's the earliest you can find them with rectal ultrasound?
We'll talk about that. I will tell you this, I have a buddy that all he does is dairy work, and he has no problem calling 25-day pregnancies with palpation. None. And probably, if he goes out there and he knows, who bred them and their success rate on some of those technicians, and he says, hey, we got one I just bred, 23, 24 days ago. So you seen her in heat? Nope. So let me feel her. Yeah. She fine. He's just convinced. A lot of that's just the tone of the uterus. If she had, not been pregnant, that uterus should have had some estrogen recently and come back into heat. Should be all toned up. It's still nice and soft. He thinks he might be able to appreciate a little bit, tiny bit of fluid. He calls them red, and he can sleep good at that, doing that. I don't, not anymore. I used to feel good about 27, 28 days. I don't now. Just, started riding the bike. You never really forget, but I'm not as good at riding a bike. I found out riding with my kids, but not as good as I thought I was. Old legs get a little tired, breathe a whole lot harder than ever. All right, so then we rectal palpation with a glass rod. I'm not into all that. I will say this, probably more popular than some glass rod is blind rectal ultrasonography. We now have these rectal probes, and where they essentially are a piece of PVC pipe that you can slide your rectal probe into. So I might not be able to get my arm inside the rectum of a white-tailed deer, so I can slide this 1-inch piece of PVC pipe that's guarded and nice and smooth, and I can slide that probe in there, and I know anatomically moving from tail, anus towards head, I can see that cervix. Most of the time you actually go find the bladder on these guys, and once you find the bladder, you kind of move left and right. I did one project where we ultrasound a lot of white-tailed deer. They were wild. Auburn has a high fence area up 280 in Camp Hill. Used to be an old dairy, but they fenced it all in, and so these deer are trapped there. So in normal, basically this time of year, well, about March, they would wait typically a month after hunting season was over. So after rut, wait a month or so, and guys would go out there in camouflage. They had shooting houses, they had tree stands, and they would dart them. They'd shoot them with dart guns, and then wait till they went to sleep, and then they'd bring them up to the old barn, and they'd be laid out everywhere on the ground. You ultrasound, kind of cool. So that's probably a little bit more popular than a glass rod. And obviously, if they're big enough, I can put that probe in my hand. On a cow, Jonathan, I will ultrasound one for somebody, and kind of just like I told you what Eckes does, Dr. Eckes, if they hadn't seen her in heat, and I really feel like I see that vesicle in there, I feel pretty good about that. And we'll have some pictures here in just a minute, but typically you don't visualize the heartbeat until around 25 days. So even then, even that mare at 14 days, that's great, but I need to see you in 2 weeks, and I won't see that heartbeat. So until I see that heartbeat, I don't feel great, about even visualizing that amniotic vesicle. So A mode, we're really looking at sound waves, okay, they still use that occasionally, in some, commercial swine operations. And, I don't know what else, radiology, you guys know that's a pretty nice way to do a puppy count, right? So, when are we gonna do that? When are we gonna do puppy counts? 42, 45 days. We need some early calcification of at least the skull, and you probably even see some teeth, okay? So waiting that long, you know, there's ways of detecting pregnancy, and I always tell people, remind them that whatever, you know, they get all geared up about, oh, we want this pregnancy test, we want this pregnancy test. Well, I also know that they're cheap, and they're not going to spend a lot of money, so I have to talk them into doing the diagnostic method that is most, that I can get the most information from. So I got to stall them for running that 28-day relaxin test that they want to do, that they read about on the internet, and convincing them that, hey, you think you felt puppies, I think I felt puppies, let's bring her in here about 42, 45 days, and let's take an x-ray, and let's do an actual puppy count. Because that helps me out on the back end, knowing, all right, I saw 7 puppies, she's only had 5, she's been pushing for 12 hours, time for a C-section. No, I did a relaxin test, she's pregnant. You know, I don't have an idea of how many. Or even convincing, if you have some, if you have a number of, you know, if you have a dam or a dog that's really, really small, you may have them come back at 60 days and take an x-ray and measure the pelvic width and the actual width of those skulls. You know, especially if they have a singleton. I've done more C-sections for one puppy than I've probably done for bunches of puppies, because it gets all that nutrition, and it looks like a 6-week-old puppy when it comes out. It's half the size of the dam. I mean, there was one poor little Yorkie, I mean, she was like 6 or 7 pounds, and she had this 1.5-pound puppy, you know, inside her, God love her. You know, she's miserable, and that thing would have never come out, ever. So then we do have some chemical tests. You can test for progesterone, but remember, we need to be waiting beyond the normal diestral period. So don't go in 2 weeks, check for progesterone, because she's gonna have some, right? We need to wait, and usually, so we wait, you know, 30 days, 28 days, somewhere in that. They actually now have them commercial and stall sidewise, that we can actually test milk on cattle, so dairymen are often doing that. Just reach up there and get them a squirt of milk, 28 days or so after they either, see what her progesterone levels are. Protein specific B, and we'll talk about this more, I'll just say that, what else is on here? ECG, so some of these estrogens in some of these species, I can palpate a normal size mare, I can ultrasound a normal size mare. I can't always do that on these thinking minis that they bring you. Or somebody brings you a donkey, and they want you to tell if it's pregnant or not. I'm not getting behind her, I'm just not, okay? It took y'all a week to catch her, why would I stick my arm in her rump? Okay, so, hey, how about we just pull a little bit of blood on her if we can get to her neck long enough, and we'll send off for an estrone sulfate test. Again, wild animals, you know, can they restrain them, get a drop of blood? So those things are out there. We talked about relaxing on 28 days for cats and dogs there. I'm not worried so much about that other. All right, grab that other PowerPoint and let's look at, you guys want a break?
Mhm.
And then we'll look at this pregnancy diagnosis. cycle, once again, we know all that stuff. We know about follicular waves, all right, what the dominant hormones are, recruitment, selection, dominance, FSH system that converts to an LH dependent system, right, needing ovulation. All right, and I told you, there's this thing out there called kisspeptin. She knows more about it than I do, so she put some other details in there if y'all want to have some good staff room reading material. All right, if we're palpating cows, I think I figured out something the other day. I don't remember how to start some of this from wild view to square view. I think this actually. The other thing. I was let down. All right, so if we're palpating cows, ultimately, majority of the time, we're there to determine, is she pregnant, okay? So when we palpate this cow, here's what's gotta be going through our head. Yes or no, okay? If she is pregnant, how are we gonna determine that? Okay, the world I grew up in of theriogenology, we talked about cardinal signs. We're gonna discuss those, and I'm going to require you to know those cardinal signs. Okay, we're going to talk about cardinal signs. We're also going to talk about indications. There may be some things that lead me to believe that she is pregnant, but they don't guarantee anything. Cardinal signs mean that she is pregnant right now, today, at this very point in time. Okay? If she is not pregnant, all right, then I want to determine what stage of estrus is she in. Okay? Does everything feel normal? Do I have all the right parts and pieces? Are they doing the things that they're supposed to be doing? If she is, again, that postpartum cow, what type of, or where am I at in the phases of involution? Okay? So that's just the very quick dichotomy of what's going through your head as you're looking for a cardinal sign. So she's going to run back all through these things. Let's talk about them a little bit more specifically in regards to transrectal palpation, okay? 30 days or so is about as early as a pretty experienced, okay? A really good palpator is going to call things pregnant based on just rectal palpation. To do that, I know I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, to actually perform proper rectal palpation, we're going to be looking at using direct methods or indirect methods, okay? And all the while, we're doing all of this very gently, okay? Anybody know what you're going to charge someone on average to palpate rectal palpation for pregnancy diagnosis in a cow? Much as they're willing to pay, right? Typically, it's going to be $3 to $5. $3 to $5. Now, if I can do one though, every 2 minutes, or if they're dairy cows and they're locked up, and I can do it in 30 or 45 seconds, that's $5 a minute. Okay? It's $300 an hour. Then you're getting somewhere. My point is, the longer you take, the less amount of money you're going to make, okay? But there becomes a happy medium. The more you miss, the less likely they are going to be calling you back. When next year you're going to be better, but you're not going to get a chance to prove next year you're better palpator, okay? And people are jacklegs, okay? They're just crooked jacklegs. One of my good friends got called out to palpate. So he palpated these cows. He's a very good palpator. He's an excellent palpator now. But the guy called my buddy's boss and said, you know, months down the road, and said, you know, that new boy of yours, he missed a bunch of cows in this herd. I got cows in heat everywhere. So he's done missed all these pregnancies. And so the owner of the clinic just went out there, didn't say anything to my buddy, and repalpated this whole herd of cows. And, you know, just, hey, that's gonna happen sometimes with new guys. I don't wanna kill his confidence. Well, about a year or two later, this finally got back to my buddy. In fact, what the guy actually did is he had bought a whole nother herd of cows, and he lied so he could get free palpation. So he told people in the community, got this new guy there, don't let him come palpate the cows, better get old doc out there, as a mechanism to get free palpation on, you know, several hundred cows. People are dirtbags, right? Told you that dogs will bite, cats will scratch, horses will kick, and people will lie, and they will. So he was good, he was very efficient, and you know, you're gonna run into stupid stuff like that when you guys get out of school about being the young person and people not wanting to see you as the doctor that day and stuff. So that happens. So anyway, we gotta have this balance between efficiency and accuracy. Okay, we gotta keep moving, but we also gotta be correct. The number one most important thing is always safety. When you guys are dealing around these large animals, if it is not safe for you or the animal, don't do it. It's not worth it. It's not worth a $3 palpation for you to jump in there, okay? All right, so what are we looking for? All right, we're really trying to find a pregnancy, but what is it exactly that we are looking for when we're palpating in general? So if we're talking about the ovaries, you're going to have to graduate up to ovarian palpation, but if you're talking about the ovaries, we're going to be looking for those dominant structures that we've talked about. We're going to look for follicles, okay? And they're just going to be that little fluid filled, almost like a blister, okay? It'll be a small little swelling. If it's nice and firm and taut, that's a, you know, that's still a growing follicle. If it's really soft and you can kind of squeeze on that thing a lot, pretty close to ovulating. That tunica albuginea is softening up. We said that corpus hemorrhagicum is really just a giant blood clot. It feels quite spongy. You guys have all seen a hematoma pool up on the floor after surgery. Sometimes that meant it was a good surgery, sometimes it meant it was bad surgery. But all of y'all probably had to pick up a hematoma off the floor. It's very spongy, kind of rubbery feel to it, so we can feel those CHs. And in the CL, we can really feel nice mature CLs. We talked about CL3, 2s, and 1s. You'll get to where you can feel all of those things. And the first thing that you notice is actually what we call the crown or the papilla of that CL. Remember, what kind of ovulation did we say? How does this ovulation occur? Where does it go? It's actually leaving the ovary, right? So it's an external ovulation on this species. So there is a tear in that tunica albuginea, and so part of that initial blood clot forming is to patch that hole, and actually a little bit of that CH will extrude out and beyond the surface of that tunica albuginea. All of that CH eventually converts to luteal tissue, and so it's like a nice crown or a papilla. And usually they're about the size of, say, like a pencil eraser. You get really good at these things, you can start to feel these tiny little white firm spots. You don't know they're white, but you feel these tiny little firm spots on the surface of these ovaries. And that's that corpus albicans. That's that old corpus luteum that really is just a scar on the surface, okay? Albicans, corpus, y'all told me meant body, albicans means white. So it's just a little white body. That ovary. So if we look at that ovary there on the left, okay, corner. All right, this is our ovary, okay, right here. Can you appreciate this line of demarcation? Right, kind of see that? All right. You have to. How good can y'all see? Let me ask you. Who here has 20/20 vision? I just got to know who I'm dealing with. Okay, that helps a lot. So maybe you don't see this. I do. I know what I'm looking for. See this pink tissue tissue here? See this darker, discolored tissue there? Okay, now do you appreciate kind of this line of separation or demarcation? Kind of, okay, that's fair enough. So nice and bright and pink over here, off coloring right in here. Okay, believe me, there's a line in there. Okay, if you follow my imaginary line, what percentage is this tissue I'm trying to draw off versus this percentage of normal tissue over here? Yeah, so roughly 2/3. Very good. So a mature CL3 typically is roughly 2/3 of the entire size of the ovary. They will be very large, okay? And that tissue is very firm. So although you guys can't all see this line of demarcation, you can feel it. So there will be a normal stroma texture, and then there will be this more firm tissue. It's similar to the density or texture of liver. Okay, you know, liver has that kind of a bounce tissue feel to it. If you were to blindly, stroke your hand across the liver, you would feel where each one of those lobes are. And you feel kind of those demarcation lines and margins from lobe to lobe to lobe. It's kind of like what you're feeling when you're palpating these ovaries. This structure right here is that crown or that papilla. That is the site in which exact location in which that ova left that follicle. And that hole in the tunica albuginea got plugged with that corpus hemorrhagicum. That's going to turn into luteal tissue. All right? So when I feel this ovary, I am going to, and let's talk about how we're going to palpate that ovary. What you're going to do is you're actually going to be holding that horn, and as you work your way out that horn, what I do, you're not going to be able just to hold on to that ovary like this. If you just reach up there and you just try with all 4 fingers, try to start feeling this over, remember it has that infundibulum draped over it. And it has fat. There's a lot of fat in that area, in the mesovarium. And so it is literally just going to squirt out of your fingertips, okay? So as I feel myself getting over to it, and I'm going to loosely put my fingers around it, maybe even pinning it down on the floor of the pelvis, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to take it and split my fingertips around it so now it's cradled in the palm of my hand, in between any 2 fingers that I can get it. Okay, doesn't matter. It can be between these 2 fingers, or you can spock it, whatever you want to do, okay? But grab a hold of it, so now I'm not putting pressure on the ovary or any direct pressure on any structure of the ovary, but I've got it stuck, okay? And now I can use my thumb to do all the talking to that ovary, all right? So I can easily feel that, okay, there's a lot firmer portion, that's a half, maybe even 2/3. Oh wow, there's this nice big, pencil eraser type feeling thing up there, and that's my crown or papilla. So that's how you're going to go through. In the mare, remember, very short pedicles, and they're attached really high. I'm never going to get my hand all the way around that mare's ovary. You sort of do, but her rectum likes to tear, so we don't do all that. I'm going to get up there, cup around it, and slowly walk around it. You're not going to move it. It's tightly adhered to that body wall. These ovaries in this cow can kind of jump all over the place. Once you get a hold of it, learn how to trap it in between 2 fingers so that you can then do some talking to it. All right, these are both ovaries here, just pinched up together. All right, there again is your nice big crown or papilla. You see there's this big plexus of vessels there. This is probably a very early CL3 or a late CH. That's a huge crown. That's actually probably got some hematoma in it. On this one, do you appreciate that big follicle, that blister look right there? All right, so that would be still a growing and a maturing follicle, probably at least in the selected early dominant stages. Okay, still going to grow some more. And here's the, this part where we're actually connected to the tip of that horn. That's what we're trying to get our fingers around, right there on the little neck of that ovary. All right, here's here's two more. Again, nice big crown for late CH, early CL3. If you look here, you can see there's a big corpus albicans, so that big white spot right there, kind of a glare from the camera. Each one of these is actually a follicle. So remember, we're always having follicular waves, so there's always, these are all probably in recruited, phases. Yeah. Hey. Yeah, please go ahead.
Why would you palpate the mare when you can't feel the CL? What would you be feeling for?
You still can feel and very much appreciate mature follicles on the mare. Okay? You can really, so even though she ovulates those things internally, they are on the surface. So you can appreciate that fluid-filled structure that is that follicle, and you can appreciate the turgidity of it. So I'm going to go with uterine tone, and, the tonicity or bounce of that fluid-filled, vesicle or actually follicle there on the ovary. So yeah, ultrasonically, we're going to, more times than not, confirm all that when you're palpating these mares. You can throw a probe in there and actually measure the size of the follicle. But you can feel follicles quite readily, mature follicles on there. So it's a good question.
When you're doing ultrasound on there, the anatomic, is the actual follicle?
Yes. Yep. So, and we're going to see some ultrasound pictures here in just a second. So, you're right. All of this nice, healthy pink tissue, and really very much so, this little corpus albicans, those are going to be very hyperechoic, very white, very dense, and then you would have all these little black spots, mixed in throughout that thing. And those are going to be all your germinal or, recruited follicles there. So, yeah, very good. So, here's our cardinal signs of pregnancy. These are the things that you need to know that you know that you know, okay? Number one up there says amniotic vesicle. And here's what I want you to understand. You're not going to feel all of these, okay? You don't need to feel all of these. You need to find one of these things for sure, okay? And if you find any one of these things and you know that you know that you know that's what I just felt, then you can say right now, today, she is pregnant. All right? Now, I'll give you a little bit of a tip. Number 1 and number 2 tend to go together, and number 3 and number 4 tend to go together. So if I'm looking for an amniotic vesicle, as I really go through my mechanism of palpation, again, this is not my presentation. I'll look at something here real quick. Yeah, see, I'm gonna reorder that. I wouldn't have done that in that order. Hadn't even talked about palpating yet. But anyway, in your order of palpation, I would feel actually a chorioallantoic membrane slip first, and if I did that, then I know I'm looking for a vesicle. If I felt placentomes, then I know it should be a mature enough pregnancy that I should find a fetus somewhere. Does that make sense? You feel placentomes, forget about a vesicle and a membrane slip. You're past that. You're not going to feel those things. You feel placentomes, there's a fetus somewhere. You go in there and you feel a vesicle, you know that I can probably find still an amniotic slip, but I'm not going to find placentomes, and it may not always feel a fetus, may not be mature enough, okay? So, know that you know these things right here, and they'll make more sense as we go along. So, I said there also are some indications of pregnancy. Why do we just call them indications?
They're not.
Yeah, because you didn't call them cardinal signs. You did. Because if I find them, it leads me to believe that she is probably pregnant, right? Leads me to believe she is probably pregnant, but it's not a guarantee, okay? So, asymmetry of horns. Why could we have asymmetry of the uterine horns? Could be pregnant, right? One horn could be bigger than the other with a pregnancy, all right? So, if that was the case, though, what would we feel? Feel a vesicle, probably feel some chorioallantoic membrane slip, right? That could define asymmetry in horns. However, what else could it be? So could be postpartum. Yep, could be actually some involution of a uterus. So that's good. So yeah, and so she'd be another postpartum cow. That'd be an involuted uterus. Yep. So it could be some slight asymmetry there. So you're talking about like an ovarian cyst? Shouldn't affect the uterus in as far as asymmetry. Now, what if we did have a ovarian cyst? What would be the likely tonicity of that uterus? Quiescent, right? Quiescent, probably even potentially that one other designation that we said we're probably going to save for only flaccid. It's going to be so quiescent, it's actually hard to find that uterus, okay? What else would be called an asymmetry? So, look at number 2. It could be fluid, right? But it's going to be pathological. Whatever it is, it's not a pregnancy, it's going to be pathological. So, if it's asymmetry, probably going to be fluid, okay? And you got to differentiate a pregnancy from the metrus, okay? Make sure it's not just a metra. You could also have lymphosarcoma, which is common due to smooth muscle being in there, or excuse me, leiomyoma. And you can also have lymphosarcoma of the uterus, but leiomyoma for the smooth muscle of the uterus. You could have a mummy, or you could have a macerated fetus. We'll talk about those later on. So what about if we do feel a CL? Is that a guarantee that there's a pregnancy? No, she doesn't even have to be exposed to a male, right? To just have a CL. But remember how I told you, if I know she could have been exposed less than 30 days ago, and I think I feel a little bit of asymmetry, or I think I feel a little bit of fluid, and there's a nice CL, now I start stacking up indications, then that makes me feel better. But I tell them, hey, don't hang your hat on this thing. Somebody needs to come back and call her pregnant for you. Okay? Primitus in the middle uterine artery. Okay? Anybody know what that is? Yeah, it's that palpable thrill. You can feel that blood pulsing through that middle uterine artery. Okay? It's almost like vibrating. You feel like a vibration, a rhythmical vibration. Feel that wave of arterial muscles contracting and pumping blood through there. Why is it only an indication? I guess maybe. So it only shows up about 3 or 4 months into pregnancy, and then it actually hangs around for several weeks during that involution period. Okay, so you reach in there and you feel primitus and asymmetry and fluid. She could have just calved the other day. Okay, so those are all indications, and I stacked up 3 indications there, but really she was a postpartum cow. Okay, so those things might lead you to believe, and they might slow you down and decide to look one more time for a cardinal sign. Okay, but if she's got a cardinal sign, I can call her pregnant today. Don't mean she's going to keep it. Don't mean she's going to deliver a live calf. But today she's pregnant when I'm palpating. Okay, so estimating the days or stage of gestation. Okay, early on in pregnancy, we're depending really on the palpability of that chorionic membrane, chorioallantoic membrane, and the size, relative size and or length of that amniotic vesicle. Some people talk about the crown's or rump length, and they try to measure these things in centimeters, okay? But I don't live my life that way. And I try to put them relative to other things that I know have a relatively normal size and shape. We'll get there in a minute. Placentone. If I feel placentone, I know she is pregnant, okay? However, I can only use placentomes to help gestational aging, the placentomes that are present at the uterine bifurcation, or in other words, right there in the very small body of that uterus. Because the closer you get to the fetus, the bigger those placentomes will be. So the closer I am to the fetus, the more intense those cotyledonary caruncular attachments, that functional placentome unit, it's much bigger and it's much more involved. And you can imagine, if I have a right horn pregnancy, the very last caruncle out in the tip of the left horn, probably not a lot going on there, right? It's probably got more to do with, maybe helping pull away, fetal waste than it does delivering, a lot of healthy blood supply there. Still functional. All right, so if we're going to go palpate these girls, 35 days is what average palpators try to claim. Move some pictures around there. I'll switch the slides. So bear with me. Y'all's probably normal, isn't it? Anyway, 35 days. That amniotic vesicle is going to be nice and round, and it's roughly the size of an English pea. All right? And remember that membrane slip is only going to be in that pregnant horn. So if I go in there and I palpate a membrane slip, now where am I looking for a membrane slip? What portion of the uterus am I looking at? At that bifurcation. So remember, I'm checking for tonicity, uterine tone, and at the same time, I'm trying to determine if I have a membrane slip. So if I have quiescent uterus, and I think I have a membrane slip in the right horn, check the left horn, quiescent too, that makes sense, they should be fairly similar, but no membrane slip, I start thinking pregnant, in the right horn, less than 42 days. So now, I'm going to intently go palpate that right horn first before my hand gets tired. My arm gets tired. And we'll see if I can find a vesicle. If I find a vesicle, anything from an English pea to a very, very small grape, you're looking at 35 to 42 days. Okay? And these are all days that the old timers picked and said we could all agree on. All right? And then my mentor didn't like to talk about things in centimeters, and so he picked all kind of different crazy vegetables and fruits and other critters that people could remember better than, if I told you 3/10 of a centimeter, that don't stick. But if I told you an English pea, y'all have not eaten enough English peas and pushed them around on your plate long enough that you know relatively what the size of an English pea is, right? So 42 days, I really now might be able to slip a pregnancy or a membrane in both horns. So if I feel a membrane slip in both horns, I'm going to go at least 42 days, at least a grape-sized vesicle. At least I've got to find that when I go palpate. Now I don't have the intent of going in one horn or the other because I've got a slip in both horns. So I'll give you a tip as you are palpating. It is much more normal motion to supinate, to bring your hand back towards your midline. So oftentimes it's cumbersome to do the backhanded motion there, pronation. So sometimes I try to make myself pronate first, okay, before my arm gets tired. I want to go do the abnormal motion first, and then come back over here. My arm will be relaxed, and I can easily supinate and finish. So I oftentimes force myself to go backhanded and do that left horn first, and then come back to my right horn. I palpate now left-handed. 48 days, membrane slip both horns. That vesicle's getting up there to a small plum size. You talk about a golf ball almost, and it's still fairly round. Okay, it's still fairly round. Now, if I jump out there to 53 days, we're talking about, still, we're always gonna have membrane slip in both horns past 42 days, but now we're talking about more like something that we would recognize in a very, very small, grade A size egg, okay? Dr. Carson always said a Banny chicken egg. A lot of people don't know what a Banny chicken is anymore. I think he just liked to say some of these words, to be honest with you. But it's a very, very small egg, and it has this elongated, more of that elliptical feel to it, all right, like a classic egg that we would think about. And that's because the vesicle size now is outgrowing the rate at which the uterus will stretch. So you think about it, if I put a round globe inside a tube, and the globe grows, the tube is resisting it, and it's going to start to lengthen it along the length of that tube. Make sense? So that a vesicle starts to grow in length. There are a lot of things, I remember all of these things, and I have little tips and things, the way my brain works, that I always remember. One of the other things we can talk about is finger size. So less than one finger is going to be 35 days or less. 2 fingers is going to be 42 days. That works for me. 2 fingers, 42 days. Great. Okay. When I get out here to 53 days, that's 3 fingers, 53, 3 fingers. Okay. Grade A egg. That's how my brain works. Okay. I've remembered a lot of finger sizes. We don't all have the same fingers, though. Okay. So you got to do your fingers, not my fingers. All right. I know that my index finger is 17 millimeters. So if I find a 2-finger follicle on Mare, that's 35, and she's going to ovulate the next day or so. I better order semen. I feel a 2-finger follicle on Mare. So we move up, and notice where we start jumping, every 5 to 7 days or so, and then it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And really splitting the difference between a 53-day or a 58-day, I mean, does that really do anything for anybody? It did for Dr. Carson. He was really good at it too. I mean, he would say at least 53 days, but it's a little bit bigger. She's probably 55 days. And I'm going to go, saw her bulling 54 days ago, late in the evening, almost 55, Doc. I mean, he was just crazy how good he was at doing that. Anyway, here's some really important ones. Notice 62 to 65 days. Okay, you're now working up there. 58 days is all 4 fingers. 62 days, I'm looking at the full width of my hand, and somewhere then between 62 and 65 days, I actually have the ability now to feel a fetus for the first time, and that uterus or that vesicle has gotten big enough that I've got enough fluid. I'm losing the turgidity. I don't have that nice globed up round structure. It's elongated enough, and the uterus is finally relaxing enough that I can palpate down into that vesicle, and I can feel that very, very small little house mouse sized fetus in there. Okay? And that's a critical time. That's a very important that I can say, wow, I felt the fetus. Now, be careful, because you can also hurt little fetus. Okay? Don't take much to get rid of Mr. House Mouse. And don't take much to get rid of Mr. Fetus. You have to be very gentle. You can decapitate them at this age very, very easily. So when I am palpating, I'm measuring the size of that vesicle. What I'm doing is I'm taking my hand. I've got my hand turned up like this, okay, and I'm letting that vesicle sit in my hand, and I'm taking my thumb and I'm going bloop, bloop, measuring the front to the back of that vesicle. How wide is it? How wide is it? Oh, how bigger my hand is. I'm going to stop, take my thumb, and start pressing down into that vesicle very gently. Got a little bump, and then I may create a little allotment, a little bit of fluid wave. So I'm not just trying to squish all the way down. If I felt something, I'll stop, maybe bounce a little bit, feel a little mouse come up. All right, well, okay, all right, pregnant, 63 days, move on, right? Give them 5 hours. It took you 12 minutes to get there. Y'all gonna be hungry. I'm gonna be hungry, we gotta get better. Alright, then these things start to really take off. 65 days, you can feel that fetus. 75 days or so, now we're starting to talk about a little gerb, okay? Dr. Carson say maybe a cotton rat, okay? Little cotton rat, okay? That's one you find outside, but they ain't the big ones. Not like, not like he would say 90 days, not a rat, an R-A-T rat, like one of the New York City sewer rats, a shown up one, okay? For us in the country, that'd be a gopher rat. Okay, they got back legs and they can jump, and you swear it's going to come attack you on that bush hog. And it makes a loud noise when you run over one. And in my house, I had a hawk that learned the sound of my bush hog, and he would come out every time and sit in this tree and catch rabbits and mice every time I was out there bush hogging. I knew he was smart. You bush hog, you make about 2 or 3 laps, and there he was, sitting on the same fence post or that tree, and he'd get him something to eat every time. Alright, we're getting close to being out of time. Here around this 75-day mark, if you are a good palpator, if you take your time, you can start to appreciate some placentomes. Okay? 75 days, really good palpators. They're going to be about the size of a shirt button. You guys know what bubble wrap feels like? Those little small bubbles? That's what they'll feel like. Because they're still fairly immature too, okay? So they're not nice and rigid like those mature ones are. But right there, as you're palpating in the body of that uterus or the bifurcation, you feel something that feels a little bit like bubble wrap. Those are some 75-day placentomes. Now, get out here at 90 days, I'm going to feel that rat-sized fetus. I'm going to notice that asymmetrical uterus, and one horn's really bigger than the other. At 90 days, this thing also is probably trying to fall off the brim of the pelvis. Okay? It's getting heavy enough that it kind of wants to hang over the brim of the pelvis. Prior to this, everything is up in the pelvic inlet, laying on the floor of the pelvis. And I'm just kind of scooting over most of it. I'll feel that rat. I'll readily feel that fetus, and I'm going to have to take my time and go, okay, there's his tail or his nose, and I'm going to go back and forth a couple times thinking about what size rodent do I think this thing is. And then you can back up as you're leaving and intentionally go look for those dime-sized placentomes. So I usually feel that fetus. Sometimes you're feeling placentomes prior to the fetus. Sometimes you'll actually feel the fetus and you have to back up and slow down. So really, again, you start splitting hairs here, but 90, 120, 150, we start jumping out into months, okay? He's got this 100 days in there, and it was because sometimes you could feel that rat and dime-sized placentomes, but notice that you jump from 90 days to 120, talking about a rat all the way up to a cat, okay? Your average 6.5-pound house cat, okay? Not no Tom that's roaming the neighborhood behind the grocery store that weighs 13 pounds and 6 of those is testicles. I'm talking about just the average old little, just a little sweet tabby cat sit up on the couch with you at night, when you maybe having a glass of whiskey or chewing some tobacco and just kind of sit there with you in the recliner. One of those, okay? That's how animated he was, but you can easily know that those placentomes are bigger than a dime, but they sure aren't as big as a quarter yet. So what's in between a dime and a quarter? A nickel. So if you found a nickel, placentome, and it was some very small cat or a fetus or a kitten, it's somewhere between 90 and 120. Okay. Now once we hit that 150 mark, so if I said 90 days is wanting to dive off to the rim of the pelvis, I get out there at 120, it's really dipping on down. Now I talk about 150, actually I may not be able to reach it. It is going to be on the absolute floor of the pelvis, or of the abdomen, the floor of the abdomen. Those broad ligaments are going to be stretched as far as they can go. And typically the rumen is kind of sitting on top of it. All right, so imagine that, you know, this thing started out in the middle, and I fall over the brim of the pelvis, but now I've got this big round, you know, thing over here just left in midline, so it oftentimes pushes me over to the right, and then eventually I get heavy enough, I slip up under it, and I'm all the way on the floor of the abdomen. So if I go in there and I find the cervix, I can't pull it up, I can't retract it, and I start chasing it, next thing I know, I feel it diving over the brim of the pelvis. I feel a $half size placentome. I know she's at least 5 months bred. I reach down there as far as I can. I do not feel a fetus. What I will do is I will cheat and I'll move over to the right side because if it's down there, the rumen's on the left. Anything displaced will be on the right, and I'll oftentimes start blotting or create myself a fluid wave over there on the right side. And most of the time I'll have something to come up and bump my hand that I feel like was, you know, a maturing fetus that has calcified, you know, bones and tissue there. All right. This is it for as far as the detail that you can derive from placentomes. From this point out, those placentomes don't really get any bigger. So if you feel $half size placentomes, then we know she's at least 5 months. You then have to put your hand on a fetus to start guesstimating. I have some other indications like way down and just to the right. I think that's typically about your 5-month fetus. When they get 6 months or so, they start getting big enough to push back on that rumen, and they'll kind of slide back towards midline. And you can usually reach and feel that fetus, you know, at your fingertips. It's usually fairly readily out there. Dr. Kozel's got Brittany up here, but really Dr. Carson would say spaniel, pick a spaniel, any spaniel, you know. He said there, when at 5 months, you know, legal beagle is 25 pounds, you know. I'm not talking about some of these beagles y'all run rabbits with these days. I'm talking about beagles back when I was a boy. 25 pounds is a legal beagle. I'm talking about 25-pound fetus, $half placentome. 180 days, spaniel. Pick a spaniel, any spaniel. I like a lemon pointer. Lemon spotted pointer is what I like. When you get down to the pointer, he had all these nuances. But the spaniels are going to be roughly, you know, 30 to 40 pound dog, right? Your pointers are going to be 40 to 50 pound dogs. You see Doberman Pinscher, and then he would say German Shepherd out there at 270. Okay? And somebody would always say, well, I know a lot of Dobermans that are bigger than German Shepherds. You say, well, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the sure enough German Shepherd police hound dogs, the man killers, the ones that will take you down and they'll take your arm off. Okay, the ones that get the bad guys. That's the one I'm talking about. Here's the thing: when you get to that 5-month mark, and I know that placentome is $50, and I can say that it's at least 5 months. Really, what is going to be the dictator of all of these dog sizes that we just talked about? So, could be nutrition, right? Or genetics. Genetics is going to be the #1 thing. And how do we measure those genetics? These guys over here have been talking about it all morning. We got a set of numbers that we can go digging in. EPDs. Everybody know what EPDs are? Expected progeny difference. So one of the biggest EPDs out there is birth weight. Okay? Birth weight, these guys have been talking about weaning weight. Really, I think they're talking about yearling weights on this particular bull, but the idea is that if I can have a calf born pretty small, she should not have any trouble. I can eliminate dystocias. Or I can at least have confidence that I can use this bull on my heifers, who are going to be smaller than those mature cows. Problem is, though, if I have a small calf, he don't grow very fast, and he doesn't weigh as much as the other ones at weaning day, and so I don't get paid as much. Does that make sense? So, ideally, we're talking about trying to have a calf born as small as possible that will grow as quickly as possible and will wean above average. Okay? But if that bull exists, he's worth at least $1.5 million. was last Saturday for Angus bull. $1.5 million. He's got a weaning weight that is unbelievable. I do not believe it. Anyway, so my point here is, if I reach in there and I'm palpating this little sweet little Jersey herd, and I feel what I believe to be a Brittany Spaniel, is that gonna mean the same thing as when I'm out there palpating Chad's cows? No, because he's gonna have these big old eared things with all this redundant tissue, and they're gonna have bad attitudes. And I'm not really gonna go palpate. I'm gonna recommend Chad pull blood himself and run a biopsy. Anyway, so we have to, once we get to the 5 months, all those fruits and vegetables and eggs and finger size is very consistent up until around about that 5-month window. After that, all your dogs, okay, becomes very breed specific. And the reality is, these type of charts were made in the 60s and 70s as the cows just continued to get bigger. We've actually seen a reduction, okay, more efficiency. We don't need that big of a cow to wean that much calf anymore. They're much more efficient. So we've seen the overall weight and size of our cattle actually decrease over the past 10 or 20 years. Let me see what today, we may stop right there. Yeah, we'll stop right there. So what we'll do is,